Hey there, this is Andy Greider, and I am the host and producer of Unique This Week. Once again, we are joined by an incredible, amazing, stunning guest. Dorine Rivers is an intrepid adventurer and an accomplished entrepreneur, and she's just back from summiting Kilimanjaro, and she's returning to the exciting world of consulting. She's the CEO of Alpha 81, and she specializes there in things like strategic planning and management. But as you get to know her in this interview, you'll realize she specializes in just about everything. She's a published author, a creative a few times over, and we're here to talk today also about her book, Brain to Bank, where she takes lessons from both business and life, including ones like her recent scaling in Kilimanjaro that's similar, and she weaves them into one of the most complete and thorough guides to entrepreneurship that I've ever read, and let's just say that I've read a few. So welcome, Dorine. Thanks for being here. Let's start with Kilimanjaro. Wow, that's quite an accomplishment. Talk to us about what led you to do that.
Uh, Thanks, Andy. It's always so great to be with you. You're one of my most favorite people. Kilimanjaro was something I had put on my bucket list seriously 30 years ago. I went on safari in October, and I kept flying over Kilimanjaro, going to camp on this safari. And I'm thinking two things. One, this has been on my bucket list since 1993. And two, you ain't getting any younger. So I came home and I signed up, and I knew that if I paid the deposit and then I booked my airfare, that I would be committed to going. And once I take that step, I knew that I would go and finish it. So I started hiking. I'm actually a biker by trade, not a hiker. But I started hiking 3 or 4 times a week, and I got in shape, and I showed up there, and I actually summited on my exact birthday with 33 porters singing happy birthday to me on the top of the summit of Kilimanjaro. But there was a defining moment in the first couple days of that hike. And after we came out of the rainforest, there was this looming Mount Kilimanjaro, snow-capped. And it's the first time we could see it because we'd been in the rainforest for a couple of days. And I'm looking at it, and I'm watching all the porters with these bright yellow bags ahead of us. And then, the people that were hiking in front of me. And I'm looking at the goal, which is the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. And I'm thinking, this whole thing starts with deciding you want to do it, and then taking the first step, and then having commitment to taking all the steps it takes to get to the top. And once you take the first step, that commitment engages, and you say, I'm not quitting until I get there. And it was just a huge reminder of everything in life. It's diet, it's losing weight, it's setting a goal, it's starting a new business. All of it. It is about deciding you're going to do it, get your plan ready. How are you going to do it? And then taking the first step and deciding you're never quitting until you get there. And there it was in this picturesque moment with Kilimanjaro looming in the background.
And like you said, that's an entrepreneurial lesson, and it's a lesson about life too, setting that goal and sticking to it. And I think that's one of the things that defines you, River, is you are somebody that sticks to things. You are somebody, and that comes through in the Brain to Bank book. It comes through in so many different ways, and in getting to know you. At the same time, you mentioned the team that it took to take you up Kilimanjaro. It's the other hikers, it's the porters, it's everybody else. So it's funny because the biggest lesson that I got out, well, maybe not biggest, but the one that sat with me really strongly, because it's something I'm really bad at, was you shouldn't and can't really do it alone. So I thought that was one of the biggest lessons that came out. But what was the biggest lesson you meant to convey to your readers in the book Brain to Bank?
I would say the biggest thing to remember is this: if I can do it, you can do it. It's just a matter of figuring out what you want to do, get your game plan. There's a little graph in there, and it says, think it, organize it, do it. And it sounds simple, doesn't mean it's necessarily easy to do, but the process is simple. What do you want to do? How are you going to get there? And then start, and don't quit. One of my favorite 4-letter words of late is grit. And it is about grit. And I decided when I started, for example, Kilimanjaro, that I was going to get to the top of that. If I had to climb on my hands and knees, I was going to make the top. And I didn't have to climb on my hands and knees, but I would have. But I over prepared for it, knowing that it was going to be difficult and not knowing what to expect. I thought I need to expect the unexpected. And business is the same way, right? You don't know what you're getting into, and there's a little sizzle on my website that says you don't know what you don't know. And those are always the big surprises. But if you're always prepared, somehow you handle it and you problem solve it, you move past it, and you keep going. And life is that way, business is that way, being an entrepreneur is that same way, marriage is like that, it's all like that.
It really is. It really is. I mean, one of the things that really hit home with me in a big way also was the comprehensive nature of the material, but how well it's offset by the stories that you've woven in. What was it that made breaking down all this fairly complex material so easy for you?
I think one of the things I was trying not to do is what so many business books do, which is tell you all these great stories of how people succeeded and how it changed their lives and all these things. And that's all great. And maybe you can relate to that as a reader, and maybe you can't. And I thought, really, for me, my greatest lessons in life have been things that have not gone well. And I have learned from those lessons. And I make a joke about that in the book. And I say, if it's true that you learn from your lessons, I'm the smartest person in the world, because I've made that many mistakes. And so I decided to give examples of what companies did that did not work for them, which is mostly what companies do anyway. They don't do things that are right. They do it the wrong way. What are the implications of that? And I give examples of that. And I say, this company launched a technology company, and they were in business 12 years. They never had a business plan, which means a couple of things. One, they never thought about what they're going to do. Two, they never had a roadmap to follow. And three, when it came time to sell that company, the investors wanted a business plan. So we have to go back 12 years and invent a business plan, which should have been there in the beginning. And so that's an example of what not to do. Don't start without a business plan. And the book has a lot of examples like that say, this is what happened. Don't do this, do that.
Exactly. Well, the other thing I love are those action accelerators. It's sort of like monkey read, monkey do. We want to call it that. But what inspired that approach? I mean, that's a great way to end each of the lessons. Is there's an action accelerator, that kind of kicks in for you to get you to enact what you've been reading immediately. So what caused you to put that in there? Because that's not I don't see that all the time, especially not in books that are maybe in that entrepreneurial realm. I don't see that kind of approach all that often. What was the cause there?
I think, again, it's sort of lessons learned for me in the past. And I read at least one book every week. And sometimes I'll read it just for information, and I'll pick up 10% of knowledge, and it moves me forward 10%. But a lot of times I'm reading something that I want to implement. Unless I am writing those things down in a notebook, as I read it, it says, I just learned this. And then I make myself, I have to put it on a timestamp, and it'll say, on Monday, go to this website and do this to help you with the new company you're forming. If it's not an action item, all I've done is learn something new. Not knowledge is knowledge. Learning something new is great, but what are you going to do with that? And reading a book like Business Brain to Bank is about, what are you going to do about the new business that you want to start? You can't just think about it. You have to write it down and decide when you're going to do it, who's going to help you do it, who you might delegate it to, but somehow there's an action plan for every single thing you're thinking, or it just sits there. And so I thought, well, it may be really easy if it was a 1, 2, 3 approach for people reading chapter 1, do this.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, guess what? You're 5% down the road in chapter 1. Keep going, then you'll be 10%, then you'll be 15%, because you're doing your action accelerators as you go.
Exactly. Another thing that I noticed, there's so many lessons in the book, and there are times when you sort of make it clear to the readers that some of these things that are things that entrepreneurs think are trivial or non-important that turn up to be absolutely critical for their business growth and their survival as a business. What do you think are some of the most important things there that somebody might think are trivial or non-important that turn out being absolutely paramount?
Well, I would say the business plan, back to that, that's essential. That does two things. It forces you to think about what you're creating. It
Right.
also forces you to create a business entity. I've worked with companies that, for example, they might be engineers and they've created a really cool physical product because they can't wait to do that, because that's their zone of genius. And I'm really great. I'm going to make this robot that crawls across the desk and brings me a pencil. And how cool is this? At the end of the day, all you have is a robot, because you have not created the infrastructure that makes that a business, that markets it to people who will actually buy it. You just have a robot. So the business plan forces you to do all that, getting your entity. So I had a company that just decided to do business within its existing company, and then they went to sell that part of it, and they couldn't break it out. It didn't have its own LLC. It didn't have its own QuickBooks. It was meshed with everything else. I said, "Are you intending to sell your core company you've had for 50 years?" Well, no, we're just going to sell this part. I said, "Well, right now you're selling all of it because it's all the same."
Yeah.
And those are critical things. So those are things to do in the very beginning, or you pay for it down the road. At some point, you're going to exit this business, right? You're going to not be here. You're going to sell it. Your kids are going to take it. A big M&A deal comes in and says, "Hey, here's, $50 million. Go retire on the beaches of Costa Rica." And if you're not ready for any of that, you have to invent all that, and it never looks or feels the same.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest keys that most people don't look at. And I see it a lot when you see exit planning being done literally in the last year of when they want to sell the business. And that's the worst time in the world to try to do it. So yeah, I agree with that completely. Now, another thing that I found to be really interesting, there's so many niches that people can be working in, so many different verticals that folks can be running around in. And a lot of times books are geared towards a niche or towards a vertical or towards a specialty. They'll write something like a brain to bank for medical or a brain to bank for technology. You have done this in a way that this applies to just about every vertical out there. If I can't think of one that it doesn't. How did you manage to do that and keep things still very fresh and relevant for the reader?
I think it comes back to really 30 years of doing business consulting. I've worked in a couple dozen industries and come to know all of them well. And I have found that about 80% of every company has the same kinds of things, systems and processes, and doing things all the same. And then there's about 20% that makes it specific to that industry. So if you hit that 80%, then you've hit the majority, and then it can be specialized for whatever that little niche might be, but you're almost there at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say the old adage of every business puts their business pants on the same way every day. For the largest part, they might have a special buckle on it, or they might have a special button or something like that, but they're usually very, very similar. And I would agree, in my background with consulting, that's what you see. So it's not a surprise. But again, a lot of times people overthink it. And I love the fact that Brain to Bank, while it's tremendously well thought out, doesn't overthink either. So it's a really great balance that way. What do you think would be the next steps for you? Is there another book in the future? Is there another course coming up? What is your goal for moving things forward from here?
It's really interesting you're asking me that, because just this morning, I finished a free offer for your listeners, and it's a spin out book from Brain to Bank. It's actually chapter 7, and it's called Working Together Alone: The Beauty and Freedom of Outsourcing. And it's all about using outsourcing to build your little empire without taking on the overhead of full-time employees way before you're ready, if you're ever ready. And I'm going to offer it to your listeners by, if they just go to workingtogetheralone.com, it will bring them to a website where they can actually read the entire book online as a flipping book. And it is expanded beyond what chapter 7 talks about in Brain to Bank. And it's relevant information, and it's things that you can use now. And the other thing is, if the readers want to go to braintobank.com, there are free resources, free, whether you ever buy the book or not, that you can go and use to help you build your new business. So those two things are free, and I really sincerely hope that they help to help you get your business up and running the way that you want it to.
River, thank you so very much. That's ridiculously kind, and at the same time, knowing you, it's right in the wheelhouse. So, but thank you, and thank you on behalf of the listeners. I'll make sure the information's on the screen for everybody. There's two addresses to go to, and we'll get them up there for you so you can see them. River, if somebody wanted to reach out and talk to you about consulting or help with a business or anything along those lines, how would they do that?
I would say just go to braintobank.com, and there's a little form there you can contact me, and I'm happy to help, and I'll reach back to you.
Awesome. Is there any last tip or last piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with?
The main thing is this: most people have a really great idea in their lifetime, at least one. And they get stuck because they don't know where to start. And that's what made me write the book. So why would you let your idea just sit there and die because you don't know how to take that first step? And I guess in some horrible way, I'm pitching my book, but I'm telling you, it is the roadmap and it is a blueprint. Just follow it, and you are actually going to get your idea out of your head into the marketplace. And what a great feeling that would be.
Indeed, it would. And I'll go ahead and be the guy to pitch your book also here. River, thank you for being here today. It's such a pleasure to have you as a guest. Again, I was talking to River before the show, and I said, listeners, I said that I've read so many books on entrepreneurship, and this is one that's going to sit on the top of the pile. It's going to get revisited. And now that there's an expanded chapter 7, heck, I'm checking out the free link. Make sure you check out Brain to Bank for the free resources. River's heart is in the right place. So if she's ever pitching anything, it's because it's actually good for all of us. Just again, thank you very much for being here. Thanks to all of our listeners. My name is Andy Grider. This is Unique This Week. We'll be back again next week with another business growth development show for you, with an entrepreneur or somebody doing something new or different in a cool way, something that makes you think, something that makes you stretch, something that makes you, just step back and say, wow, that's pretty cool. But we're going to even go ahead and leave with an action step, because River has inspired me here, that I would like you to take, if you would, go to uniquenessispower.com, which is where all these shows reside, and pick one and share it with a friend who's an entrepreneur. It's a little bit self-indulgent there, but really I'm asking you to use the power of our guests to help a friend. And this might be the one. This might be the one you've taken forward, because quite frankly, I don't think there's been a better episode for entrepreneurs. There might be one or two that are out there that are in the same kind of category, but this is really just amazing amount of information. Again, thank you, Dorine. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Yeah.